For 23 years, my wife and I have been inseparable. We were high school sweethearts, two kids who fell in love under the bleachers, dreaming of a life together. Everyone thought we were perfect for each other, the kind of couple that made people say, they'll make it forever. And for a while, they were right. For 17 of those years, we stood side by side as husband and wife, raising 3 beautiful daughters ages 11, 13, and 15. Our home was filled with laughter, inside jokes, secret handshakes, and memories that felt like they'd last lifetimes. To the outside world, our family was the picture of happiness. But behind closed doors, something darker lurked, a quiet storm brewing beneath the surface. I never saw it coming. How could I? She had always seemed content, or so I believed. But now, looking back, I realize how blind I truly was. Beneath her smile, there was an emptiness she couldn't or wouldn't share with me. A deep-seated boredom gnawed at her soul, one she kept hidden from everyone, including our children. It wasn't just boredom, it was suffocation. The monotony of family life, the predictable routines, the endless responsibilities, it all became too much for her to bear. Yet instead of talking to me about it, she buried her feelings deeper and deeper until they consumed her entirely. The cracks began to show subtly at first. I missed family dinner here, an excuse not to join us on vacation there. At the time, I chalked it up to stress or work demands. After all, she worked hard, balancing her career with being a mother. But these absences grew more frequent, more unexplained. There were nights when she would sit silently at the table, staring into space as if lost in another world. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd force a smile and say, "Of course, why wouldn't it be?" Her words sounded convincing, but her eyes told a different story, one I failed to read until it was far too late. Now, as I reflect on those years, I wonder how many times she sat alone in silence, wrestling with her inner demons. Did she ever consider telling me? Did she think I wouldn't understand? Or worse, did she simply stop caring? These questions haunt me every waking moment, twisting the knife deeper into my already shattered heart. What makes it even harder is knowing that this woman, the same woman I vowed to love forever, is also the one who betrayed me in the most unimaginable way. It was a nightmare I never saw coming, for long years, my wife had been living a double life, a secret so devastating that it shattered the foundation of everything we had built together. She confessed to me, through tears and trembling words, that she had been having an affair because she felt bored with our life. Bored. The word echoed in my mind like a cruel joke, a dagger twisting deeper into my already broken heart. How could someone who once promised to stand by me through thick and thin throw away 23 years of love, trust, and memories just because she was bored? But the confession wasn't even the worst part. Without warning, without a single explanation, she vanished from our lives. One day, she packed an overnight bag, kissed our daughters goodbye as if it were any other morning, and walked out the door. That was it. No note, no phone call, nothing. For weeks, she disappeared completely. No texts, no calls, not even a whisper of her whereabouts. It was as if she had fallen off the face of the earth. My 3 girls, ages 11, 13, and 15, were left confused, scared, and desperate for answers. "Where's Mom?" they would ask me, their eyes wide with fear. All I could do was lie, telling them she was staying with her parents and that we should be patient and understanding. But inside, I was unraveling. The silence was deafening. Every unanswered text, every ignored call, felt like another nail in the coffin of our marriage. I called her family repeatedly, only to be met with vague reassurances that she was safe but needed space. Her brother claimed ignorance, and her coworker confirmed she'd shown up briefly at work before vanishing again. Meanwhile, I was drowning, trying to hold myself together while caring for 3 daughters who needed their mother more than ever. Nights were the hardest. The house felt hollow without her presence, and the weight of her absence pressed down on all of us. Our oldest daughter stopped eating. The younger two cried themselves to sleep, and me. I sat alone in the dark, replaying every moment of our life together, searching for signs I must have missed. Had I been too blind to see her in happiness, too complacent to notice her slipping away? Then came the night I hit rock bottom. After days of radio silence, I broke down in front of the girls, sobbing uncontrollably. They hugged me, trying to comfort me, but how could I explain to them that their mother, the woman who tucked them in at night, who baked cookies for their birthdays, who sang them lullabies, had abandoned us? I couldn't. So instead, I buried my pain deeper, pretending to be strong for them, even as my world crumbled around me. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of the storm. When she finally sat down to explain herself, I thought I was prepared for the worst. But nothing could have braced me for the cold, calculated way she justified her betrayal. She claimed there were no problems between us, no arguments, no fading love, no intimacy issues. "You didn't do anything wrong," she said, her voice trembling but eerily calm. "It wasn't about you." Those words hit me like a freight train. How could it not be about me? We had built a life together, a beautiful, imperfect, chaotic mess of a life, and now she was telling me that none of it mattered because she felt bored. She described feeling trapped in an endless loop of family routines, where every day blurred into the next. Breakfasts, school runs, work meetings, dinner tables, it all became suffocatingly predictable. At first, I thought she was exaggerating. Every couple goes through phases like this. Every parent feels overwhelmed by monotony at some point. But as she spoke, her tone grew sharper, more desperate. She admitted that she craved something new, something exciting, something that would make her feel alive again. And instead of talking to me about it, instead of trying to fix what she perceived as broken, she turned to someone else. Someone who promised her freedom, adventure, and escape from the life we had created together. What hurt the most was how casually she dismissed everything we had shared. The late-night conversations, the inside jokes, the secret handshakes, all reduced to mere stability that left her yearning for chaos. She confessed that when AP entered her life, he offered her a glimpse of a different world, luxurious vacations, spontaneous weekends away, promises of a future without responsibilities. It was intoxicating, she said, and she couldn't resist. Even knowing it would destroy our family, even knowing it would devastate our daughters, she chose him over us, over me. I wanted to scream at her, to shake her until she realized the magnitude of what she had done. Instead, I sat frozen, staring at the woman I once loved more than anything. Her excuses sounded hollow, almost robotic, as if she had rehearsed them in front of a mirror. But beneath the surface, I saw fear of facing the consequences, fear of losing everything she took for granted. For years, she lived a double life, lying to me, lying to our children, lying to herself. Now, sitting across from her, I wondered if she even understood the depth of the pain she had caused, or if she simply didn't care anymore. When the truth finally unraveled, it was like a sledgehammer to my chest. My wife had been carrying on an affair with a man I'd never even heard of until now for over 4 years. 4 years. The number echoed in my mind, each syllable heavier than the last. He wasn't just some random stranger, he was her coworker, someone higher up in her company, a man who wielded power and influence. According to her confession, their relationship began innocently enough, casual conversations at work, shared lunches, but soon spiraled into something far darker. AP promised her everything: luxury vacations, extravagant gifts, freedom from the responsibilities that she claimed suffocated her. He painted a picture of a life without limits, one where she wouldn't have to worry about school runs, bedtime stories, or grocery shopping. It sounded like a fairy tale, but for us, it became a nightmare. What made it worse was how meticulously she lied to cover her tracks. Over the past 4 years, she fabricated excuse after excuse: late meetings, weekend conferences, traffic delays, family emergencies. Every lie rolled off her tongue so effortlessly that I never doubted her. Even during the pandemic, when we were all trapped inside together, she managed to maintain contact with him through texts and calls, sneaking away whenever she thought no one was watching. When lockdowns eased, their physical relationship resumed as if nothing had changed. She admitted that there were moments when guilt gnawed at her, causing her to briefly cut ties with him, but those moments were fleeting. Each time, she returned to him, unable to resist the intoxicating allure of his promises. And then came the final blow, AP's sudden death. A heart attack, they said. The news hit me like a second betrayal. Not only had my wife destroyed our family for this man, but his passing left her in a state of emotional chaos. She returned home days later, visibly shaken, her eyes hollow and distant. At first, I thought she was grieving for our marriage, for the life we once had, but no, she was mourning him. Her silence spoke volumes, her trembling hands betraying the depth of her pain. Watching her crumble under the weight of her own choices filled me with a mix of pity and rage. How could she sit across from me, sobbing over the loss of the man who helped destroy everything we built? It felt surreal, almost cruel. Now, as I pieced together the fragments of her betrayal, I realized how deeply entangled she was with AP. Their connection wasn't just physical, it was a lifeline for her escape from reality. And yet, here we are, stuck in the wreckage of her decisions, trying to navigate a future that feels impossible to rebuild. The moment the truth unraveled, it felt like the ground beneath me had crumbled. AP's sudden death from a heart attack became the catalyst that exposed everything: my wife's 4-year affair, her lies, and the life she had been living in secret. When I confronted her family, their reactions were telling. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law stammered through vague explanations, urging me to forgive her and move on as if nothing happened. They even tried to guilt-trip me into staying with her, claiming it was what was best for the children. But how could they expect me to simply erase the betrayal? How could they think forgiveness was possible when my entire world had been shattered? When my wife returned home after weeks of silence, she was visibly shaken. Her hands trembled as she packed her things at work, and her eyes darted around like a cornered animal. She cried uncontrollably, unable to form coherent sentences, but not once did she offer a real explanation. It was clear she wasn't ready to face the consequences of her actions or us. Meanwhile, our daughters began to piece together the fragments of her behavior. Our oldest daughter, sharp and observant, started asking questions I couldn't answer without revealing too much. "Why does Mom always leave during weekends?" she'd ask, her voice laced with suspicion. The younger ones noticed too: the missed dinners, the hurried exits, the late-night phone calls, but they didn't yet understand the full weight of what was happening. What made it worse was the way my in-laws shielded her. They minimized her absence, excused her lies, and even tried to paint her as a victim. Their interference only deepened my frustration and anger. I wanted answers, not excuses. Yet every time I pressed her for the truth, she retreated further into herself, leaving me and our daughters to grapple with the wreckage of her choices. Our home, once filled with laughter, now felt suffocatingly tense. Every shared meal was punctuated by awkward silences. Every glance between us carried unspoken accusations. And through it all, I couldn't shake the feeling that this nightmare was far from over. At first, I tried to hold myself together for the sake of our daughters. Every morning, I woke up with a forced smile, pretending that everything was fine even though my world had crumbled overnight. My wife's betrayal loomed over me like a dark cloud, but I buried my emotions deep inside, determined not to let my pain spill into their lives. The girls were already confused and scared. How could I add to their burden by showing them how broken I truly was? But as days turned into weeks, the weight of her lies pressed harder on my chest, suffocating me bit by bit. The pressure from her family didn't help either. Her parents called daily, urging me to forgive her and keep the marriage intact. They spoke about stability, about protecting the children, as if ignoring her betrayal would somehow make it disappear. And then there was her, my wife, sobbing through texts and voicemails, begging for another chance. Each message felt like salt in an open wound, a cruel reminder of what she had done. Yet, despite the rage boiling inside me, I resisted lashing out. Until one night, I couldn't anymore. It started with a simple question from our oldest daughter: "Why doesn't Mom want us anymore?" That single sentence shattered whatever fragile composure I had left. Something inside me snapped. I stormed into the living room, my vision blurred with anger, and began shouting words I can't even remember now. I grabbed a vase off the table and hurled it against the wall, shattering it into pieces. Then came the books, the picture frames, anything within reach. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the house, followed by the terrified cries of my daughters. They huddled together on the stairs, watching me lose control, their wide eyes filled with fear. When I finally stopped, panting and trembling, the reality of what I'd just done hit me like a freight train. My youngest whispered, "Daddy, are you okay?" Her voice broke something in me, a mix of guilt and despair so overwhelming that I collapsed onto the floor, burying my face in my hands. In that moment, I realized how far I had fallen. I wanted to scream at her mother, to demand answers, but all I could do was sit there, defeated, while my daughters clung to each other in silence. It was the lowest point of my life, a stark reminder that this nightmare wasn't just destroying me, it was tearing apart everyone I loved. The fallout from my wife's betrayal didn't just shatter me, it tore through our daughters like a hurricane, leaving each of them grappling with their own storm. Our oldest daughter, sharp and fiercely protective, became a fortress of anger. She refused to speak to her mother, glaring at her whenever she entered the room. One evening, after overhearing fragments of a heated argument between us, she screamed, "You're nothing but a traitor." The words hung in the air, heavy and cutting, as my wife froze mid-step, tears welling up in her eyes. But I knew better. This wasn't remorse, it was fear. Fear that she had lost not only me but also the children she claimed to love. The younger two, however, were more vulnerable. They clung to memories of happier times, often breaking into sobs when they thought no one was watching. At night, I'd hear muffled cries coming from their shared bedroom. Whispers about how much they missed the way things used to be. My heart broke every time I saw them struggle to reconcile the mother they adored with the stranger who now stood before them. One afternoon, while helping our youngest with her homework, she looked up at me with those big, innocent eyes and asked, "Daddy, does Mom still love us?" Her voice trembled, barely above a whisper. The question hit me like a punch to the gut. How could I explain to an 11-year-old that her mother, a woman who once sang her lullabies and kissed her boo-boos, had chosen someone else over us? I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. Instead, I pulled her close, hugging her tightly as tears streamed down my face. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt truly powerless. As days turned into weeks, the divide between my wife and our daughters grew wider. While the younger ones gradually accepted her presence out of habit or necessity, I could see the cracks forming beneath the surface. They smiled for her, hugged her goodbye, but their laughter lacked its usual warmth. And then there was our oldest, whose rage showed no signs of fading. Every interaction between them felt like walking on eggshells, waiting for the next explosion. It was exhausting, watching my girls navigate emotions far too complex for their ages. Yet, amidst all the chaos, one thing became painfully clear: the family we once cherished was gone, replaced by something fragile and fractured. After weeks of evading me, she finally sat down one evening, her hands trembling as she clutched a cup of tea. For the first time since her return, she looked me in the eye, or at least tried to, and began recounting the details of her betrayal. Her voice wavered between guilt and defensiveness as she admitted to lying about countless trips, work obligations, and fabricated excuses that had become her alibi for long years. "I told you I was going on business trips," she said, her tone almost robotic, but they were never real. Each word felt like a punch to my gut, confirming every suspicion I'd harbored but hoped wasn't true. She spoke matter-of-factly about how she manipulated our lives, canceling family plans, skipping dinners, disappearing during weekends, all to be with him. The woman who once planned surprise birthday parties for me now casually confessed to orchestrating an elaborate web of deceit. When she finished, she paused, staring at me with what I assumed was supposed to be sincerity. "I still love you," she whispered, her eyes glistening with tears. "And I want us to fix this to save our marriage," but her words rang hollow, devoid of any genuine emotion. It was as if she had rehearsed them in front of a mirror, trying to sound convincing without actually feeling it. Every syllable dripped with insincerity, making my blood boil. How could she sit there, after everything, and claimed to love me. Did she think I would forget the pain she caused, the way she abandoned our daughters, the life we built together? Her confession left me more enraged than before, not because of what she said, but because of how little remorse she seemed to show. There was no depth to her apology, no acknowledgement of the devastation she wrought. Instead, she framed herself as a victim of circumstance, blaming her actions on boredom and dissatisfaction while conveniently ignoring the consequences. When I pressed her for specifics, her answers grew vague, almost dismissive. It became clear that she wasn't ready to confront the gravity of her choices, or perhaps she simply didn't care anymore. As I sat there listening, anger and disbelief swirling inside me, I realized something painful. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, was gone. What remained was a stranger wearing her face. Despite her tears, her apologies, and her desperate pleas for another chance, my decision was final. I was done. I could no longer live with the woman who had betrayed not only me but also our daughters, the very foundation of everything we had built together. Every time she cried or begged, it felt like salt being rubbed into an open wound. Her words were hollow, rehearsed, as if she thought repeating "I'm sorry" enough times would erase the past for years of lies and deceit. But forgiveness wasn't something I could offer, not after everything she had done. One night, unable to sleep, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote her a letter, a long, painful account of every hurt she had inflicted on me and our family. The pen trembled in my hand as I listed out the moments that had shattered my trust, the missed family dinners, the fabricated work trips, the nights she spent with him instead of with us. Each sentence felt like reliving the pain all over again. At the end of the letter, I wrote the words I knew she needed to hear but would never truly understand. "You killed the love we once had." It wasn't just a statement, it was a truth so heavy it crushed what little hope I had left. The next morning, I handed her the letter without a word. She read it silently, her hands shaking, tears streaming down her face. For the first time since this nightmare began, she didn't try to defend herself or make excuses. Instead, she simply stared at the floor, broken. But even then, I couldn't bring myself to feel pity for her. What she had done was unforgivable, and no amount of crying could change that. What mattered most now was doing right by our children. I told her firmly that while our marriage was ending, we owed it to them to maintain a civil relationship. They deserved parents who could coexist peacefully, even if we could no longer be together. Divorce wasn't just about us, it was about giving our daughters a future where they wouldn't have to choose sides or bear the weight of our broken promises. As much as it pained me to say it, I reminded her that this was the only way forward. And though I knew the road ahead would be difficult, I also knew it was necessary for their sake, and for mine. Every day felt like a battle I wasn't equipped to fight. The weight of her betrayal crushed me, leaving me oscillating between anger, despair, and disbelief. Some nights, I would sit alone in the dark, replaying memories of our life together, our secret handshakes, inside jokes, shared dreams, and wonder how someone who had been my entire world for 23 years could throw it all away so carelessly. One evening, after another sleepless night, I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection as if searching for answers etched into my own face. How could I have loved you for 23 years and not see that you'd changed? I whispered aloud, my voice trembling with a mix of grief and rage. It was a question I couldn't answer, one that haunted me every waking moment. The emotional toll was unbearable. During the day, I tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy for the girls, but by night, the walls I built around myself crumbled. There were moments when I wanted to scream until my throat bled, to punch something until the pain in my chest subsided. Other times, I felt hollow, as though a vital part of me had been ripped out without warning. My mind became a battlefield, each thought more destructive than the last. Was this my fault? Had I failed her somehow? Or was she simply incapable of appreciating what we had? Desperate for guidance, I turned to online communities, where strangers offered advice born from their own heartbreaks. Their stories resonated deeply, reminding me that I wasn't alone in this nightmare. I also sought professional help, meeting with lawyers to navigate the legal complexities of divorce and therapists to untangle the mess inside my head. Each session left me drained yet slightly clearer about what lay ahead. Still, no amount of counsel could prepare me for the raw intensity of confronting her lies or the gut-wrenching realization that the woman I once knew was gone forever. As days turned into weeks, I found myself clinging to small victories, getting through a conversation with the kids, resisting the urge to lash out at her, even managing to eat a meal without feeling nauseous. But just as I began to feel a flicker of strength, another wave of emotion would hit, pulling me back under. I realized then that healing wouldn't come quickly. It would be a long, grueling journey filled with setbacks and fleeting triumphs. And though I feared I might never fully recover, I vowed to keep moving forward for the sake of my daughters and for myself. The house felt like a war zone, even though the battles were silent. For weeks now, we had been living under the same roof, bound by the 90-day waiting period mandated by law before our divorce could be finalized. Every day was a test of endurance, her constant apologies and pleas for forgiveness clashing with my resolve to keep my distance. She tried everything, leaving handwritten notes on my desk, cooking my favorite meals, even sitting outside my room late at night, crying softly in hopes I'd hear her. But none of it moved me. My focus remained solely on protecting our daughters from further harm. They were already fragile enough. Their laughter had dimmed, their eyes carried shadows of confusion, and their trust in people, especially their mother, was shattered. One night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, she did something unexpected. Without knocking, she slipped into my bedroom, her face streaked with tears. "Please," she whispered hoarsely, falling to her knees beside my bed. "I'll do anything to fix this, to fix us." Her voice cracked, raw with emotion. For a moment, I froze, caught off guard by the desperation in her tone. It wasn't just sorrow, it was fear, guilt, and perhaps a flicker of regret. But beneath it all, I saw manipulation, a calculated attempt to sway me back to her side. I sat up slowly, meeting her gaze with cold detachment. "Don't hurt them anymore," I said sharply, my voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "That's all you need to think about now, not me, not fixing us. Just the girls." The words hung heavy in the air, each syllable laced with years of pain and betrayal. She flinched, her hands trembling as she wiped away her tears. "You don't understand," she choked out, shaking her head. "I love you. I always have." Her declaration hit me like a slap, a cruel reminder of how hollow those words had become. Love, if she truly loved me or our daughters, she wouldn't have abandoned us for 4 years. She wouldn't have lied so effortlessly, betrayed us so deeply. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm. "It's too late for that," I replied, my voice icy. "What's done is done, now leave." She hesitated, her body trembling as if torn between defiance and despair. Finally, she stood, casting one last pleading look before disappearing into the hallway. As the door clicked shut behind her, I sank back onto the bed, my chest tight with anger and exhaustion. This wasn't over, not by a long shot, and yet, every interaction like this only reinforced what I already knew. There was no going back. Betrayal cuts deeper than any blade, and the wound my wife inflicted on me feels like it will never fully heal. How could she of all people destroy everything we built together? She was my first love, my confidant, the woman I trusted more than anyone else in this world. Yet, she chose someone else over us, over our daughters, over the life we had painstakingly created. The depth of her betrayal is staggering, a constant reminder that even the strongest bonds can shatter under the weight of lies and selfishness. Every memory we shared now feels tainted, as if the laughter and joy were nothing but illusions masking her discontent. But amidst the pain, I've realized something crucial: love alone isn't enough to sustain a family. Love doesn't prevent boredom or erase dissatisfaction. It doesn't guarantee loyalty when challenges arise. Sometimes, staying together isn't about passion or romance, it's about choice. A conscious decision to prioritize what truly matters, especially when children are involved. My wife failed to make that choice. Instead, She let her fleeting desires dictate her actions, leaving behind devastation in her wake. And while part of me still loves her, another part knows that forgiveness would be an injustice to myself and to our daughters. For their sake, I must move forward. They deserve a father who can guide them through this storm, teaching them resilience and strength. I want them to understand that relationships require effort, honesty, and sacrifice. That walking away from problems isn't the answer, facing them head-on is. Divorce may not be ideal, but it's better than living a lie. As much as it hurts, I remind myself daily that my role as a parent outweighs my need for closure. In moments of weakness, I whisper to myself, maybe love isn't enough to hold a family together. Sometimes, it's just a matter of choosing what's right. Those words anchor me, reminding me that healing won't come overnight, but it will come. For now, I focus on rebuilding not just for myself, but for the 3 little girls who depend on me to show them how to rise after falling. This journey has taught me that trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to repair. But integrity, courage, and unconditional love, those are worth fighting for.